I always thought becoming a grandmother would be the happiest chapter of my life. After raising two kids and going through the ups and downs of marriage, I believed I'd finally earned some peace. Quiet mornings, Sunday dinners, the sound of little feet running down the hallway again, but with none of the sleepless nights or tantrums that came with parenting. Just the sweet stuff. Just the love. Or so I thought. My grandson, Micah, was born on a rainy October morning. I remember the way my daughter, Ava, clutched my hand in the hospital room, eyes wide with exhaustion but glowing with pride. "You're going to be the best grandma ever," she whispered, holding her newborn to her chest. I cried that day, tears of joy. Real, honest-to-God joy. It felt like our family had come full circle. At first, Micah was everything you'd expect from a healthy, happy baby. Curious eyes, giggles that melted your heart, and the way he'd curl into you like he never wanted to let go. Ava and her husband, Tyler, lived just 15 minutes away, so we saw them often, every week, sometimes twice. They'd come for dinner, or I'd stop by to babysit. My husband, Dan, adored Micah. He'd sit for hours letting him crawl all over him, laughing when the baby tried to tug on his beard. But as Micah grew older, something began to shift. It started small, so small we didn't even notice at first. Just a moment of hesitation when he walked through the door. A tight grip on his mom's leg. A frown that seemed out of place for a toddler who once squealed with excitement every time he saw us. "He's just tired," Ava said once. "Nap schedule's been weird. But tired babies cry for a minute and then calm down." Micah didn't. His cries became louder, more urgent. At first, he'd only cry when he saw our front door. Then it escalated. Screaming, sobbing, pleading not to come inside. He'd bury his face into Ava's neck, his little hands shaking. "He's going through a phase," Tyler tried to reason. "He's two. They get weird at two." I tried to stay calm to not take it personally. But how could I not? This was my grandson, my flesh and blood. I'd held him in my arms as a newborn. I'd rocked him to sleep. I'd sung lullabies into the darkness while he dozed off in the crib I kept in our guest room. And now he looked at me like I was someone to fear. Like I'd hurt him. Or worse, like someone here had. Dan dismissed it quickly. "He's just a fussy kid. They all are these days. You baby them too much. They turn soft." He chuckled at his own joke, but I didn't find it funny. Not even a little. I started noticing things. Micah wouldn't make eye contact with Dan. Not anymore. He used to light up when Dan picked him up or spun him around. Now he screamed. If Dan so much as walked into the room, Micah would run behind Ava and grab her leg like his life depended on it. "Something's wrong," I said one night, after they left. The house felt cold, even though the heater hummed quietly. Dan looked up from the couch, annoyed. "You're overthinking it." "No, I'm not. He's scared." "Dan, he's scared of you." Dan scoffed and turned back to the game on TV. "He's a toddler. They're all scared of something. You gonna start accusing me of something now?" That stuck with me. The way he said it, defensive. Quick. A little too quick. I shook my head. "No, of course not. I just want to understand what's going on." But I couldn't stop the thoughts. I started replaying moments in my head, tiny ones that didn't mean much on their own but suddenly started to add up. The way Dan would sometimes raise his voice when Micah got too loud. The time he scolded him harshly for spilling juice on the carpet. The moment his face twisted with irritation when Micah knocked over a lamp and cried about it. Was that all it was? Just an old man losing his patience? Or was it something more? One afternoon, Ava came over while Tyler was at work. Micah was clinging to her like usual, his little face buried in her shoulder. "Can we try again?" I asked gently. "Maybe just let him down for a minute? See if he'll play in the living room?" Ava hesitated, then slowly lowered him to the floor. "It's okay, baby," she whispered. "Grandma's here. Remember? You love her." Micah looked up at me. I smiled, reaching my arms out slowly, like I was trying not to scare a frightened animal. He blinked, then took one step forward. Then another. My heart swelled with hope. Then Dan walked into the room. Micah's entire body tensed. His lips trembled. And then, before we could say a word, he screamed. Ava grabbed him immediately, whispering, it's okay, over and over, her voice shaking. Dan just stood there, frozen. What the hell? He muttered. We tried to calm Micah down, but it took almost an hour before he stopped crying. After they left, I didn't speak to Dan. Not a word. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered into the attic, looking for old photo albums. I don't even know what I was searching for, comfort maybe. Proof that things had once been normal. I flipped through pages of our family's life. Christmases, birthdays, vacations, pictures of Dan holding our kids, laughing. And then, there it was. One photo, buried in the back. A family barbecue from years ago. My daughter was maybe 6. My son was 8. Dan stood in the middle, holding a beer. His arm around a man I hadn't thought of in years. James. My brother-in-law. Something in my chest tightened. James had passed away nearly a decade ago. He wasn't close to us anymore near the end, but he'd been a part of our family for years, at every holiday, every summer trip. He and Dan had been close, too close sometimes. I never understood their friendship. James had a dark side, drinking, unpredictable mood swings, rumors that always seemed to follow him like a shadow. I stared at the photo for a long time. The next morning, everything changed. We were sitting in the living room when Ava called. Her voice was tight, shaky. Mom, Micah said something. What do you mean? She hesitated. Then whispered. He pointed to a picture. One of the ones on our fridge. From that old barbecue at your house. He pointed at someone and said, that man hurt me. My heart stopped. I couldn't breathe. Who? I asked, even though part of me already knew. There was silence on the line. Then Ava's voice broke. He pointed at Dan. I didn't speak for several seconds after Ava's words settled into my ears. He pointed at Dan. It felt like the entire air had been sucked out of the room. My throat went dry. My heart pounded in my ears like a war drum. My hands trembled around the phone. No, I finally whispered. Ava, are you sure? I'm not making it up, Mom, she said, her voice cracking under the weight of it. Micah was sitting in his high chair. He looked at that picture on the fridge, the one from your house. And when he pointed at Dad, he said, that man hurt me. I asked him what he meant, and he just started crying. Screaming, like, not a tantrum, screaming, like he was reliving something. I swallowed hard. He's just 3, Ava. Maybe he's confused, or maybe he heard something, saw something on TV. No, she said firmly, through clenched teeth. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't pretend. He was scared, Mom, and I believe him. Believe him. That sentence shot straight through me like a knife. All my memories of Dan, 40 years of life together, raising children, growing old side by side, began to blur. I started seeing everything through a different lens. Could there be something I never saw? Something I didn't want to see? I whispered. Has he ever been left alone with Dan? Ava went quiet. Then, once, about 2 months ago, I had a dentist appointment and Tyler had work. Micah stayed at your house for 2 hours. I remember because he cried when I dropped him off, and I told myself he was just cranky. I closed my eyes. 2 months ago. That's around the time the fear started. Oh God, I muttered. Mom, Ava said gently. I know you love Dad. I know this is hard. But I need to know. I need to know if something happened. The room felt like it was closing in around me. My husband, Dan, who had built our deck with his own hands, who walked our daughter down the aisle, who held our grandson in his arms just months ago, could he be the reason Micah was so afraid? I couldn't breathe. Later that night, when Dan came home from the hardware store, I was sitting at the kitchen table. The same table where we laughed over Thanksgiving dinner. The same table where Micah had once giggled as he crushed crackers with his tiny fists. Dan walked in, whistling casually. You okay? You look pale. I looked up at him, really looked. And suddenly, I didn't see my husband. I saw a stranger. I need to ask you something, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. He froze, sensing the shift in my tone. Okay. Did anything happen? When you were alone with Micah? Dan blinked. What kind of question is that? Just answer me. He laughed nervously, but it was tight, defensive. No, of course not. What kind of twisted idea is that? I stood up. Ava said he pointed to your picture. Said you heard him. That you did something. Dan's face flushed red instantly. He's 3 years old. He probably didn't even know what he was saying. He cried for an hour after you walked into the room last week, Dan. He's scared of you. Why? His voice rose. Because kids are unpredictable. Because he's probably been spoiled by Ava and Tyler and he's throwing fits now that he doesn't get everything he wants. I took a deep breath. I need the truth. Dan slammed his hand against the counter. There is no truth to tell. I didn't touch that boy. I'd never hurt him. But I didn't believe him. Not fully. Because behind his rage was fear. Not fear of being accused, but fear of being found out. That night, I packed a bag and drove to Ava's. I couldn't stay in that house anymore. When she opened the door, I collapsed into her arms, sobbing like I hadn't sobbed in years. I don't know what's real anymore, I whispered. I don't know who I married. We sat on the couch, and Ava brought over the photo Micah had pointed at. There was Dan, smiling with a burger in one hand, a beer in the other, looking like the perfect suburban grandfather. Can a child that young remember something clearly? I asked her. Trauma doesn't care about age, Mom. It imprints. He may not understand it yet, but he felt it. And that fear, it's real. You can't fake that. I nodded, barely able to hold my head up. I keep asking myself if I miss the signs. I've been asking myself the same thing, she said quietly. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed in Ava's guest room, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember anything that would make sense of this. But I kept coming back to one moment, from years ago. Something I had buried deep in my memory. It was when our son, Jared, was 12. I remembered walking past his room late at night and hearing him crying. When I asked what was wrong, he said, I had a bad dream. But his eyes, they were wide, hollow, scared. I had asked Dan about it, and he said, it's probably just puberty. He's a weird kid sometimes. I had believed him. Now, I wasn't so sure. The next morning, I called Jared. He answered on the second ring. Hey, Mom, everything okay? I told him about Micah. About the crying. About the picture. I held my breath, waiting. Silence. Then a long, slow exhale. Mom, he said quietly. I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want to ruin everything. But there's something I never told you. My whole body tensed. What is it? I never liked being alone with Dad when I was a kid. I didn't know why, but he made me uncomfortable. I remember him getting angry, like scary angry, over small things. One time, I spilled milk and he shoved me so hard I hit the wall. I had a bruise, and when you asked, I told you I fell off my bike. I felt like throwing up. I thought maybe he was just strict, Jared continued. But then, when I turned 13, he started coming into my room at night, just standing there, watching me. Sometimes I'd wake up and he'd be sitting in the chair across from my bed, not saying anything. Just watching. Oh my God, I whispered, my knees giving out beneath me. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't have proof. Because I thought I was the one who was messed up. And because I loved you, I didn't want to blow up our family. Tears poured from my eyes. I couldn't breathe. I never told anyone, he said. I buried it. I left for college and never looked back. I was shaking. My stomach twisted with guilt. Jared, I'm so sorry. I should have seen. It's not your fault, Mom, he said. You believed in him. We all did. But belief isn't truth. And love. Love isn't always protection. Micah's fear wasn't just a child's whim. It was a warning. And we hadn't listened. But now I would. Because something dark had been hiding in our family for decades. And it was time to bring it into the light. When I hung up the phone with Jared, I collapsed on Ava's kitchen floor. There was no grace to it, just this raw, broken fall like all the strength had drained out of my bones. I sobbed in a way I hadn't since losing my mother years ago. But this was worse. This wasn't grief for someone who had passed. This was grief for everything I thought I knew. Everything I had built my life around, collapsing. Ava found me there minutes later, kneeling beside me without a word, holding me like I was the child now. I should have protected him, I whispered. I should have protected both of you. She was crying too. We didn't know, Mom. You can't blame yourself for something we were never supposed to see. But I did blame myself. I couldn't stop. I replayed every moment of the past. Every joke Dan told. Every family barbecue. Every holiday we shared. I watched it all in my mind, like a horror movie I had starred in without knowing the plot. The man I had shared a bed with for 4 decades might have hurt not only my grandson, but my son. And if it was true, if those suspicions were real, then how many times had I made excuses for him? How many times had I silenced my own gut? The guilt gnawed at me. Ava and I sat down that afternoon, just the two of us, and began writing everything down. Every incident we could remember. Every strange look. Every shift in behavior. Ava even pulled out an old box of childhood drawings Micah had made. One drawing, just scribbles and stick figures, showed a house with 2 adults and a small child. But one figure was crossed out in black crayon, its face scribbled violently over. "That's your house," Ava whispered. She turned it over. In her handwriting was a note from when he gave it to her. "Micah says this is Grandma's house. Not sure why he crossed out Grandpa." I stared at it for a long time. "I need to confront him," I said. Ava's face paled. "Mom, are you sure that's a good idea? He won't confess unless I push. He'll deny it if I do it gently. I know Dan. I know how he lies. How he twists things. You shouldn't go alone." "I won't, but I have to go." We called Jared. He flew in the next day. When I saw him step through Ava's door, I couldn't hold back. I rushed to him and wrapped him in the kind of hug only a mother can give, a hug soaked in regret. "I'm so sorry," I choked. "For not seeing it. For not asking. For letting him be around you." Jared held me tight. "You're seeing it now, Mom. That's what matters." That night, we sat around Ava's table, all 3 of us. It was the first time in years that I had my 2 children by my side without Dan. We made a plan. The next morning, Jared and I drove to my house. Ava stayed back with Micah. I wasn't going to risk him being near Dan again. Ever. My hands shook as I opened the front door. Everything felt colder than usual. Or maybe it was just me. The walls looked older, sadder. The pictures on the walls seemed to stare down at me with disapproval. The house no longer felt like mine. Dan was in the living room, reading the newspaper. He looked up when he saw us, raising an eyebrow. "Well, look who finally decided to visit." I ignored his smugness. "Sit down," I said, voice sharp. Dan looked between me and Jared. "What is this?" I sat across from him. Jared stood behind me, his arms folded, his eyes cold. "Micah told Ava something," I began. He said. "You heard him." He pointed to a picture of you and said it. Dan didn't blink. He just stared. "Micah is 3, he finally said. He probably heard someone else say it." "Then why is he scared of you? Why does he scream when you walk in the room?" Dan shrugged. "Because you've all poisoned him against me." "Don't," I snapped. "Don't you dare try to twist this. He was fine with you until that one afternoon you were alone with him. After that, everything changed. And I need you to tell me the truth." Dan's jaw clenched. "I didn't lay a hand on him." "Then explain why Jared remembers you standing in his room in the middle of the night when he was a kid. Why he remembers being shoved into a wall. Why he used to be afraid of you too." I turned to look at Jared. "Tell him." Jared stepped forward, his voice shaking but strong. "You used to scare the hell out of me. I thought it was normal. Your anger, your silence, your way of making me feel worthless. But it wasn't. It wasn't normal. You watched me while I slept. You controlled us with fear, and I buried it because I thought I had no choice." Dan finally stood, face flushed. "That's a damn lie." "Is it?" I asked. "Then why are you yelling? If it's a lie, why are you acting guilty?" Dan turned on me, venom in his eyes. Because you're accusing me of being a monster, Susan. After everything I've done for this family. You mean everything you've taken from this family? I whispered. He froze. And I knew. That pause was everything. That pause was confirmation. You didn't have to say it, I said softly, tears streaming down my face. Your silence told me everything. Jared's fists were clenched. I saw him shaking, trying not to lunge across the room. But he didn't need to. We had the truth now. I want you out of this house, I said. Today. Dan laughed bitterly. You can't kick me out of my own house. I can. This house was left to me by my parents. Your name isn't on the deed. You were too proud to sign anything back then, remember? Said it made you feel less of a man. Well, guess what, Dan? You're not a man. You're a coward. His face twisted. For the first time, he looked afraid. And it felt freeing. I'll call the police if I have to, Jared said, stepping forward. Dan looked between us. He realized he was cornered. For years, he had controlled everything through silence, through subtle threats, through charm that masked cruelty. But now, he was alone. He left that afternoon, slamming the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. I didn't pick it up. I let it shatter. After Dan slammed the door and left, the house went silent. Not the kind of peaceful quiet that settles over a home in the evening, but a heavy, aching silence. One that presses on your chest and reminds you of all the things you can't undo. I stood there staring at the broken picture frame on the floor. It was a photo of our family from a summer vacation years ago. Smiling faces, tan skin, laughter frozen in time. But now, the glass was shattered, the wood cracked right down the middle of Dan's face. It felt symbolic, like the universe had finally said enough. Jared bent down and picked up the pieces carefully, but I stopped him. Leave it, I said. I don't want to put it back together. He looked at me, and something passed between us, an understanding. A quiet agreement that this house, this family, this history, needed to be rewritten. That night, Ava brought Micah over. Jared stayed too. We didn't tell her everything right away, just that Dan was gone and wouldn't be coming back. But her eyes searched mine, and she knew. She knew that whatever Dan had done, it was no longer in the shadows. Micah was quiet at first. He clung to Ava's leg when he entered, just like always. But after a few minutes, he looked around. No Dan. Just me, his mom, and Jared. He slowly let go of Ava's hand and walked toward me. I knelt down, holding my breath. He reached out, tiny fingers brushing my cheek, and then he wrapped his arms around my neck. I missed you, I whispered, choking back tears. He didn't say anything, but he hugged me tighter. That was all I needed. We decided to stay together that weekend, all of us. Ava and Jared brought bags, and we turned the house into a kind of impromptu safe space. We cooked dinner together, watched old movies, sat around the fire pit and talked. It was the most honest we'd ever been with each other. At one point, Jared turned to Ava and said, "Did he ever do anything to you?" Ava looked down at her lap. "Not like that," she said. "But he controlled everything. What I wore, how I spoke, who I dated. If I brought home a B instead of an A, he'd give me the silent treatment for days. He made me feel like I was never enough. I think I spent my entire childhood trying to prove I was worth loving." Jared nodded slowly. "Same." And then Ava looked at me. "And you, Mom? Did he ever?" I shook my head. "Not physically, but emotionally? Yes. I think I just convinced myself that was part of being married. That it was normal for men to get angry. That cold silences were just how he dealt with stress. I wanted to believe the good moments canceled out the bad ones. But now I see that the bad moments were who he really was. The good ones were just distractions. The next few days were like rehab for our souls. We laughed a little more. Micah started playing freely around the house again. He danced to music in the kitchen, colored on the floor, asked Jared to build him a fort out of couch cushions. He wasn't afraid anymore. One afternoon, I sat with Jared on the back porch while Ava and Micah napped inside. The sun was dipping low, casting gold over the grass. I always wondered what kind of man I'd grow up to be, Jared said. I was terrified I'd turn out like him. You're nothing like him, I said. I know that now. But for a long time, I was carrying him around inside me. Every time I got angry, every time I raised my voice, I'd hear his voice in mine. It scared me. So I stopped talking about it. I thought silence would keep me safe. Silence protected him, I said. Not you. Jared nodded, staring out across the yard. Then he said something I'll never forget. You know, I used to picture telling someone, a teacher, a friend's parent, anyone. But I was always afraid no one would believe me. He was too good at pretending. I reached for his hand. I believe you. I always will. And I'm sorry it took me this long to say that. Jared squeezed my hand back. You're saying it now. That's what matters. That evening, Ava pulled me aside. Mom, I've been thinking, she said. We need to go further than just cutting him out. We need to tell the truth. Let other people know. We can't just sweep this under the rug. I nodded slowly. You're right. The idea of exposing Dan publicly terrified me. He had built a reputation as a kind, respectable man in our town. Church-going. Handy. Always quick to help neighbors fix things around the house. But we knew now what that facade had hidden. We spoke with a therapist, then a lawyer, then the police. And though there wasn't enough physical evidence to press charges, especially since Micah was so young, we gave our statements. Jared detailed everything from his childhood. Eva supported it with patterns she remembered. I explained the recent changes in Micah's behavior. They couldn't arrest him, but they could open a report. They could document the truth. We went to the church he used to volunteer at and spoke to the leadership. We reached out to parents we knew. We told them, gently, calmly, but clearly, what we learned. Not everyone believed us. Some people said we were exaggerating, that Jared was just misremembering, that Ava and I were turning on family. But we didn't let that silence us. Because for the first time in years, our family wasn't being quiet. And slowly, something began to heal. We started family therapy. Ava began writing, journaling everything, then turning it into a blog that resonated with other survivors. Jared began speaking at men's support groups. Micah laughed more now. He wasn't afraid to come over anymore. He started calling our house the safe house. I redecorated. I took down every picture that included Dan. I painted the walls new colors. I planted flowers in the garden. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was a place for rebuilding. One day, Micah brought me a new drawing. It was another stick figure family. But this time, there were 3 adults, me, Ava, and Jared, and 1 child. All of them smiling. There was no black scribble. Just the sun in the sky and a heart in the corner. I hung that drawing on the fridge like it was a masterpiece in a museum. And to me, it was. It wasn't just a picture Micah had made, it was proof. Proof that healing was happening. Proof that his little heart, once buried in fear and confusion, was learning how to feel safe again. And that maybe, just maybe, mine was too. In the weeks that followed, word began to spread. Not in a dramatic or scandalous way, at least not at first. But whispers traveled, as they always do in small towns. Some people were horrified, shocked, and deeply sympathetic. Others were skeptical. They couldn't imagine Dan, the neighbor who shoveled driveways in winter and ran the grill at every block party, being capable of hurting anyone. I expected that. What I didn't expect was how much it would hurt to see those people still defend him. Like they hadn't heard a word we said, like they were more comfortable believing the lie than accepting the ugly truth hiding behind Dan's charm. He was always good to me, one neighbor told Jared at the grocery store. Jared didn't argue. He just nodded, then said, "You weren't his child." That shut the conversation down quickly. The people who mattered, the ones who truly loved us, stood by us. My sister flew in from out of state and stayed a week, helping me sort through the rest of Dan's belongings. We boxed up his clothes, his old tools, his keepsakes, and donated most of them. I threw away the photo albums he dominated. I couldn't bear to see his face anymore. But some photos I kept. Not of Dan, of the kids. Of the moments before things got dark. I wasn't going to let him take those memories from me too. I had every right to remember my children smiling, laughing, living, before his shadow had swallowed their joy. One afternoon, Ava and I found an old camcorder in the attic. It was dusty and barely worked, but it had tapes inside. She hesitated before putting one in the player. "Do we want to know?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "We need to know." We watched hours of birthday parties, backyard barbecues, holidays. And the more we watched, the more patterns we saw. The way Dan would step too close, grip shoulders a little too tight. The way Jared flinched when Dan raised his voice. The way Ava seemed to shrink in his presence. It had all been there, hiding in plain sight. "I was just a kid," Ava whispered. "And I thought this was normal." I took her hand. So did I. Eventually, we came across one video that changed everything. It was a home video from when Jared was 11. He was sitting on the couch, playing with Legos. Dan entered the room, and the camera caught something subtle but undeniable. Dan knelt in front of Jared and whispered something into his ear. Jared's body tensed. He pulled away, his face turned pale, and he looked directly at the camera with wide eyes. It wasn't the act itself, it was the look. The fear. The instant, visceral response of a child who felt threatened. Ava paused the tape. We both sat in silence. "I'm giving this to the police," I said. We did. It still wasn't enough for an arrest, but it was entered into the official report. Documented. Preserved. A piece of truth, finally recorded. And for us, that mattered more than justice in the legal sense. Because sometimes, justice isn't a courtroom. Sometimes, it's the act of finally being heard. I started going to a support group for women who had experienced emotional and psychological abuse. It was filled with mothers, daughters, grandmothers. Some had stories like mine. Some didn't. But we all shared the same ache, the same guilt, the same question. How did I not know? One woman told me, "You see what they want you to see. Until they slip. And by then, it's already too late." But I had caught it. Maybe not as early as I wanted to, but I caught it. And now, I would never close my eyes again. Micah began seeing a child therapist. Slowly, he started to express more through play, through pictures, through tiny whispers that only made sense to those of us paying close attention. His therapist said it would take time, but she believed he'd be okay. "He's resilient," she said, "because he has people who listen." That word stuck with me. Listen. Dan never listened. But we did. And that made all the difference. Jared decided to stay in town for a while. He found work with a youth center and started helping kids who had experienced similar trauma. Ava went back to school to study social work. She said she wanted to become the person she once needed as a teenager. As for me, I sold the house. I needed a fresh start. We found a cozy place just outside town, surrounded by trees and light and peace. I made sure there was a room for Micah, painted it blue, filled it with books and blankets and soft lights. He loved it instantly. Called it his brave room. Sometimes, I'd catch him sitting in it, reading quietly or humming to himself. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was healing. And so were we. One evening, we sat on the porch watching the fireflies come out. Ava was on one side of me, Jared on the other. Micah sat curled in my lap, half asleep. "Do you ever think about him?" Ava asked quietly. I knew who she meant. "Yes," I said. "But not with love. Not anymore." "Do you miss him?" Jared asked. I shook my head. I miss who I thought he was, but not who he turned out to be. There was silence for a while. Then Ava said, "You saved him, Mom. Micah. You believed him." "No," I replied. "We did. Because it took all of us, Micah's courage, Ava's voice, Jared's truth, and my willingness to face what I had ignored for too long to break the cycle."